heavily guarded, chillingly silent, and built like a fortress. ADX Florence is not like any other prison. Deep in the rugged mountains of Colorado stands this federal supermax prison, the kind of place people imagine in nightmares. But it is real. And inside, men live in near-complete isolation. 23 hours a day, a single man locked in a concrete cell. This is not a story about violence. It is about silence. It is about what happens when people are kept alone, mostly unseen by the world, and how that kind of solitude touches their minds. The story begins long before any inmate arrives. The idea for ADX Florence came after a wave of violent crime, terrorism, and organized crime in the United States. Officials wanted a place so secure, so controlled, that the most dangerous people in prison could never escape. In the early 1990s, they designed a supermax facility, a prison for the worst of the worst. In 1995, ADX Florence officially opened. It was the most secure prison in the entire U.S. federal system. It was made to be a fortress, thick, reinforced concrete, long corridors, high walls, and towers. The design was intentional. Every piece of cement, every steel door, every bar was built to contain, not just bodies, but minds. When an inmate is sent to ADX, it is because they are considered especially dangerous, or because they face such risk that other prisons cannot handle them. Some have committed acts of terrorism. Some have carried out brazen crimes. Some have tried to escape. Others have killed while inside another prison. ADX Florence became the place to hold them. Entering ADX is not like entering a normal prison. The process is strict. Inmates are thoroughly searched. Their shoes, clothes, all personal items are taken. They are assigned a tiny cell, built with thick walls and no windows to the outside world. Only a small slit or a small glass panel. There is barely any decoration. No soft carpet. No pictures on walls. Just concrete and steel. In these isolated cells, inmates spend most of their time alone. The rule is 23 hours a day. For nearly all of that time, they are locked in their cell, with very limited contact to others. Usually, 1 hour is allowed for recreation or some time outside the cell in a small outdoor area, but that hour is tightly controlled. Guards escort them. Doors open and close. Every step is watched. Food is brought through small slots or served in trays. Mail and communication are limited. Visits happen rarely. Guards wear protective vests and carry weapons. Everything about the daily routine is built to minimize risk. For the men inside, the world shrinks slowly. Their universe is the cell. A low ceiling, a concrete toilet, a thin mattress. Light comes in from a small opening, sometimes just a narrow slot, and then it is dark again. There are cameras to watch them. There are sensors, too. The silence is thick. But that silence inside the cell, it does something. It changes people. Psychologists and mental health experts have long warned that long periods of isolation can be extremely damaging. When a person spends almost all their day alone, without normal social contact, the mind can start to play tricks. The sound of one's own heartbeat becomes a companion. Shadows on the walls become shapes. The mind begins to drift, to spin, to echo. Reports from former inmates, interviews with experts, and academic studies all point to a chilling reality. Men in solitary confinement often experience deep anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and even psychosis. Some struggle to sleep. Some see things that aren't there. Others make attempts to harm themselves. One peer-reviewed study, published in a medical journal, found that long-term isolation is strongly linked to self-harm and suicidal thoughts. These are not just fears or theories. They are real accounts from real people who have lived in conditions like those at ADX. Solitary confinement, especially when protracted, becomes a mental prison more than a physical one. On top of the mental strain is the weight of knowing why they are there. Many ADX inmates know their reputation. They know their crimes. They may realize that this place, this fortress, was built for them or someone like them. But they also know some of them will never leave. Some are at ADX not just for punishment, but because others believe that if they got out, they would be dangerous again, or that they might try to strike from the inside. Every once in a while, an inmate is moved out of ADX. But those stories are rare. The vast majority stay years, some for decades. Over time, people become invisible. Their names are known by very few. Their lives are hidden behind concrete walls, and shadows, and whispers. But even in total isolation, Not all prisoners are the same. Some respond differently. Some hold on to hope. Some pray. Some write letters. Some read books. Some study. Some walk in place inside their cell. They pace. They talk to themselves. They build mental routines, coping strategies that become rituals. And then there are the others, those who crumble. Their writings, sometimes smuggled out, speak of seeing things that are not there, hearing voices, losing track of time. The solitude becomes oppressive, like a living thing that pulls at reason, memory, and identity. Human rights organizations have raised serious concerns. Groups like Solitary Watch and Human Rights Watch argue that the conditions at ADX violate basic human dignity. They highlight stories of prisoners who suffer severe psychological damage, and even deaths tied to the emotional toll of isolation. Lawsuits have been filed. Families have spoken out. Experts continue to push for reform. They ask, is it right to lock someone away not just as punishment, but in a cell designed to break the mind? At the same time, the government defends ADX. Officials say it is necessary. They argue that only in places like ADX can they keep extremely dangerous inmates under constant control. They say that the design prevents escape. It prevents violence. It keeps guards and inmates safe. For them, ADX is a tool of last resort. Inside, the guards and staff walk long, quiet shifts. Their job is heavy. They see men broken by crime and isolation. They face danger, too. But their world is separate from the inmate's world. There is no easy path to understanding, no casual talk, no friendships. Their interaction is functional, limited, serious. And in that world, where every day is predictable but every moment is watched, something strange happens. Even the guards talk about the silence. They mention the weight of it, the emptiness. And a few admit that spending years in such a place, even as staff, leaves its mark on them. For the men inside their cells, however, the silence is deeper. Their world becomes smaller, their thoughts louder, and their loneliness constant. Some will never speak to another living soul again outside these walls. Some may leave with damaged minds. Others will leave unchanged, but haunted. And some will never leave at all. This is what ADX Florence was built for. To contain the most dangerous minds. To separate them from the world. To hold them in total silence. But silence is not nothing. Silence listens. Silence remembers. Silence can hurt. Here, in the fortress of isolation, the men are not just prisoners. They are prisoners of their own minds. The deeper you go into ADX Florence, the more you understand that this prison is not just a building. It is a system, a machine. Every hallway, every door, every rule is part of something bigger, a design meant to control human behavior down to the tiniest detail. Most prisons have noise, voices shouting, metal doors clanging, guards giving orders, inmates talking in the yard. But in ADX, walking down a corridor feels like moving through a tunnel where sound gets swallowed. Your footsteps echo, but nothing answers. The silence is thick, almost heavy, like the air knows not to disturb anyone. Inside those cells are men who were once part of the world. They had families, lives, stories, and choices. But now, each cell is like a small island. And on each island lives a single man. Even getting from one part of the prison to another is an event. In many prisons, inmates move in groups. In ADX, they move alone. A guard gives an order. The inmate steps out, chained at the hands and feet. More guards wait. Steel doors open with a low buzz and shut with a loud thud. It takes several locked doors to go anywhere. No one is ever allowed to forget where they are. And yet, inside the isolation, something strange happens, something officials know and prisoners talk about in letters, court documents, and interviews long after they leave. Time changes. When someone is alone for long hours, without anything new happening around them, days begin to feel the same. Some prisoners say they stop knowing whether it's Monday or Thursday. Others say they count the days by meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, because those are the only things that divide the day into pieces. A few have written that they talk to their food tray, not because they want to, but because they need to hear a voice, even if it's their own. For many inmates, the only living thing they see every day is a guard, and even that is often quick, just a few seconds at a time. Sometimes the guards look inside just to make sure the inmate is alive or behaving. Then the window shuts, and the silence returns. One prisoner wrote that the silence gets inside your bones. Another said that after months alone, even his memories became louder, old mistakes, arguments, fears, all playing on repeat. There are rules inside ADX that seem small but matter a lot to the men living there. For example, everything they get is controlled: soap, pencils, books, toothpaste. A razor is only given under supervision. Even a paperclip can be considered dangerous. So the prison limits these things to keep everyone safe. Phone calls are limited too. Most prisoners get only a few calls each month, and they are monitored. Visits can happen behind glass. No touching, no private conversations, no sudden smiles or long hugs from family. Some prisoners have no visitors at all. Others are too far from home, and travel is almost impossible. Imagine spending years where the only human face you see is behind a thick piece of glass or staring at you through a small metal slot. That kind of loneliness creates deep emotional strain. Mental health experts have studied solitary confinement for decades. They say that long isolation affects a person's brain the same way deep hunger affects the stomach. The mind becomes tired, confused, restless. A person may start talking to the walls or hearing things that are not real. There are records from prisoners who developed anxiety so severe that they paced in circles for hours. Others lost their sense of self. A few forgot how to hold a normal conversation after years of barely speaking to anyone. Doctors call it sensory deprivation. When you take away sound, color, touch, movement, human contact, the mind starts creating its own world. Sometimes that world is peaceful, but more often, it becomes chaotic. Still, the prison system insists that ADX is necessary. Some of the men held there have carried out serious acts, tried to escape other prisons, or harmed others. For those reasons, the government argues that strict isolation is needed to protect everyone: guards, inmates, and the public. But strangers to the prison ask a different question. What does it do to a person to live 23 hours a day in silence? To answer that, you must look at the stories of real men who live there. In the control unit, the strictest section of ADX, prisoners spend almost all their time in their cells. These are people the system considers too dangerous to be around others. Some have attacked guards. Others have sent threats outside the prison. A few have become violent with other inmates in lower security facilities. But danger does not erase humanity. Even the strongest minds can fall apart in such conditions. One prisoner wrote in a letter that his first month felt like he was falling backward into a hole, and the hole kept getting deeper. He tried to stay busy, doing push-ups, reading, writing, but when the lights turned off, the silence became so loud that sleep felt impossible. He said it was the first time in his life that he feared his own thoughts. Another prisoner described hearing footsteps even when no one was near. He said the silence made his mind fill in the blanks. Others wrote that the only way they survived was by creating routines: do 100 push-ups, read for an hour, walk in circles, talk out loud, stretch, repeat. These routines did not remove the loneliness, but they gave shape to the day, something the brain needs. There is also the step-down program, a system meant to slowly prepare some inmates for life in less strict prisons. In this program, inmates can earn more privileges by following rules. They can slowly gain more time outside the cell, more contact with others, and eventually even limited group interaction. Not everyone qualifies for the step-down program, but for those who do, it becomes a lifeline, a sign that the future may hold something beyond the same four walls. For a small number, the program works. They adjust. Their minds stay strong. They move to safer units, then to lower security prisons. Some eventually return to the outside world. But stepping out of a life of silence is not easy. Some men report that crowds scare them. Loud noises feel violent. Even the sound of wind can be shocking after years in a quiet cell. The most striking part of ADX Florence is that each man reacts differently. Some fall apart quickly. Some hold on for years. Some never change at all. But they all face the same questions. Who am I when I am completely alone? What happens to me inside my mind? And how long can a person live in silence before something breaks? As the years pass, changes in policy have been pushed by lawsuits and mental health studies. Some prisoners with severe mental illness can no longer be kept in extreme isolation. They must be moved to facilities with proper care. This change came after families and lawyers argued that placing mentally ill people in long-term solitary confinement was cruel and unsafe. But even with these reforms, ADX Florence remains one of the most controlled and isolating places on Earth. In the outside world, Life moves fast. Cars, phones, families, screens, sounds. But inside ADX, everything slows down. A man can spend hours staring at the same gray wall, thinking about his choices, his past, and what could have been. In those moments, some find hope, some find regret, others find nothing at all. And as the years go by, the silence grows heavier. Because silence is not just the absence of noise. Silence becomes a companion, a shadow, a judge. The men who live 23 hours alone at ADX Florence carry their past with them. But they also carry something deeper, the weight of a life lived almost entirely in their own minds. When you stand outside the prison and look at the thick walls, you might think they were built to keep danger inside. But for the men who live there, the walls do something else too. They keep the world out. And when the world is gone, all that remains is the sound of breathing, the echo of memories, and the fight to stay sane in a place where time moves slowly, and the mind must carry the weight of everything. When a man spends years inside a small concrete room, something begins to change inside him. At ADX Florence, these changes become part of the story of the prison itself, a story about the human mind, the justice system, and a question people around the world still argue about. How far should punishment go? To understand how deep this question runs, you must look not only at the inmates, but at the people who work inside the prison too. Many prison staff members have spoken, carefully and often only after they leave their jobs, about what it feels like to work in a place where almost no one speaks and almost no one is seen. Guards walk through long hallways where voices echo strangely. They check on inmates who may be asleep, writing, staring, or simply sitting still. Some inmates greet them with calm eyes. Others watch silently. Some don't look up at all. There are guards who say they feel the isolation too. Even though they go home at the end of their shift, the quiet stays with them. A few have described the job as walking through a world paused on purpose. They know the inmates behind the doors can move freely, but sometimes they feel stuck in the routine themselves. Working at ADX requires discipline. A guard must follow rules exactly. How to open a door, how to escort a prisoner, how to search a cell. Nothing can be done casually. Every moment matters. One mistake in a high-security environment can cause real danger. That pressure sits on every guard's shoulders, every day. And yet, many officers say the hardest part is not fear, it's the silence. Unlike other prisons, where guards talk to inmates, break up arguments, answer questions, or deal with noise, ADX brings long stretches where the only sound is the buzz of a door or the click of boots on the floor. Some guards say they talk to themselves on the walk back to their car just to shake the quiet out of their minds. Even psychologists and medical staff feel the unusual weight of the place. They visit inmates who may not speak much or who struggle to express what they're feeling after so many years alone. Some inmates talk through a slot in the door. Others sit at a table with guards standing nearby. Even therapy sessions are controlled and heavily monitored. Some medical workers have said they wish they could do more. But in ADX, every decision must balance security and care. That balance is never simple. This brings us to the men who try to help inmates survive the mental and emotional strain. There are mental health professionals who read letters from prisoners, track behavior changes, and alert the system when someone may need more attention. But treating someone who lives alone 23 hours a day is different from any normal therapy setting. A therapist cannot simply sit down on a couch with an inmate and talk for an hour. Everything happens under strict rules. Sessions must be short, controlled, safe. The inmate must be fully secured. Even the movement from the cell to the meeting room is a long, guarded process. Still, some inmates open up. They share their fears, their regrets, the dreams they still have even in isolation. Others shut down and refuse to speak at all. The mind protects itself in different ways. A psychologist who visited the prison years ago said something that has stayed in reports and interviews. Human beings are social by nature. When you take away almost all human contact, the brain rewires itself. Sometimes it becomes stronger. Sometimes it becomes fragile. But it always changes. These changes are not always obvious. Some prisoners seem calm and polite, even friendly in their short interactions. But inside, they may be struggling with anxiety or confusion. Others appear angry or cold, but inside they feel fear or sadness. Isolation hides emotions behind walls, just like the prison hides bodies behind doors. For some inmates, The only escape from the endless silence of ADX Florence is a small glimmer of hope called the Step Down program. It's a lifeline, a chance to earn back tiny pieces of a normal life. By following the rules and staying calm, a prisoner might get more time out of their cell, a few more minutes to talk with a guard, or even the chance to watch TV outside of solitary. It's a slow, difficult path, and very few make it all the way through. Those who do might move to less restrictive units, other prisons, and in rare cases, even back into society. But returning to the world after years of near-total isolation is a brutal shock. One former inmate described his first time back in a normal prison yard. The sound of people talking felt like a storm raging around him. The smell of fresh air made him dizzy. The sight of so many moving bodies was overwhelming. Even the vast, open sky felt too big, too bright. He had to relearn everything. How to hold a conversation, how to trust, how to simply exist around other people. These are things we do without thinking, but for him, it was like learning to walk again. Some adjust, others never fully recover. The experience of ADX leaves a permanent mark. Some say the silence helped them think clearly and changed them for the better. Others say it broke something inside them that will never heal. This leads to a fundamental question that America still grapples with. Is long-term, extreme isolation an ethical way to ensure public safety? Supporters of ADX argue that it's absolutely necessary. They point out that the prison holds some of the most dangerous individuals in the country, people responsible for horrific acts, who have plotted violence even from behind bars, or have tried to escape again and again. For them, extreme security is the only way to prevent future harm and protect both staff and other inmates nationwide. They see it as a necessary measure for ultimate control. Critics, however, argue that even the most dangerous people are still human. They believe that years of severe isolation amount to a form of psychological suffering that goes far beyond just punishment. The human mind needs connection, and depriving someone of it for so long, they argue, can create even deeper, more complex problems. This debate isn't just academic. It plays out in courtrooms, in human rights reports, and in the lives of the men held within ADX. The prison itself stands as a silent monument in the middle of this controversy, a symbol of control, fear, and unanswered questions. Some men arrive angry, some dangerous, some completely lost. But inside those concrete walls, they all face the same opponent, themselves. When you strip away every distraction, the noise, the crowds, the arguments, the movement, a person is left with nothing but their own thoughts, their memories, regrets, hopes, and nightmares. Most of us will never know what it feels like to live alone for 23 hours a day, with only a tiny window and a concrete bed for company. We'll never feel the suffocating weight of time as it crawls by, or hear our own thoughts echoing in the silence. But for the men of ADX Florence, this is everyday life. Some find strength in it. Some find a strange peace. Others lose themselves entirely. While the world outside rushes on, seasons change, cities grow, people live their busy lives. Life inside ADX moves in a tiny, repeating circle. 23 hours in a cell, 1 hour in a small, caged yard, a few words spoken through a steel slot. A life lived entirely inside the mind. From the outside, you might see the prison walls glowing in the sunset, looking strong and silent. But behind them is a world where the greatest battle isn't against the bars or the guards. It's the battle that rages, hour after hour, day after day, inside a person's own mind. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the unseen parts of our world.